a while ago, we were talking, and I mentioned that Professor David wrote an article in October about Pope Francis and politics, Pope Francis and social movements, and he said something about the church's prophetic role in the public sphere. I mentioned this because one of the articles in the journal is about religion and politics, the first one. And so I'd like to ask Professor David, where do you think is Pope Francis leading us in terms of views on religion and politics?
I think it's very simple. Francis, I think, is opening up everything about the church. It's a very bold move, extremely risky, but he doesn't seem to be afraid. He's fearless. I think he's telling the world there is no need for the Catholic Church to be defensive or to be afraid to open up or for examination and review all its teachings and its pastoral practices.
So, Professor, what should be the role of the church in politics for you?
Should it have any role except to comment about politics? I think that if the church tries to play a political role, meaning to participate in the political world as an actor, as a political actor, uh, in the modern world it will be rejected. It will be very difficult uh, to go back to an era when the church treated the state as its instrument. For example, uh, I think social evolution has taken us so far away from a time when one of the principal functions of the state was to promote the faith. We're no longer there. There has been a differentiation now. There has come a differentiation, a point where there is a differentiation of institutional spheres. And the church, instead of being the center and the dominant, most dominant of these spheres, is only now one of many spheres in modern society. That is very difficult for many church people.
And how do you see this at play here in the Philippines?
In the Philippines, as Father Mario said, there are still people who think in terms of the Catholic nation. And you see many traces of this, even in government offices. You see figures of the Santo Niño in every corridor of a government office. Theoretically, they shouldn't be there. No, they have masses in offices and so on and so forth. My wife was chairman of the Civil Service Commission at one point, and one of the few times I visited her in her office, I saw sacred figures and religious figures in. I don't know her to be extremely religious, no, my wife. So I was asking her, why do you allow this? This is supposed to be secular space. The government is is not Catholic, I said, and what do you expect me to do? Remove these? He said, I don't think that there is a need for such provocation. But what she did was to allocate a room, a prayer room for all people who are, whether they're Catholic or Muslim or Protestant, or and they want to take a break at any time, they can pray in that common room. But some years ago, in the university where I teach, UP, we don't pray before class, no? But somebody in the College of Law who was very prayerful began all her classes by praying, no? Until one of her students sued her that this is a violation of the separation of church and state. And the student won. From then on, in the College of Law, nobody could summon any student to participate in a prayer before class. Uh, but it's. I mean, the question you have to ask is whether it is necessary to provoke just to make a point, or whether doing so has real consequences that are necessary to emphasize. I, I was very critical. I remember writing a very critical article about the Supreme Court. Uh, I think they also start there, with a very, very Catholic prayer under Justice David. I was very critical, but nobody seemed to mind. No? Which really brings me to the idea of Catholic nation. No? I mean, it's very surprising that it should come from a Jesuit. Uh, Maybe you should address it to the CBCP, Father Mario, no? But if you had not called my attention to it, I probably would not have noticed it, no? Which probably leads me to think, is this not a case of overreaction, no, on your part?
Professor
No?
Magay has also written about religion and politics, and I'd like to ask her about this topic also. How do you see this changing or remaining stagnant in the time of Pope Francis?
Well, speaking as a Protestant, no? Um, Actually, yung tinatanong ni Randy kanina, what do we actually see as signs of modernity? Ang isa dyan is, first of all, yung movement towards secularization. Ang Protestantism actually is a secularizing faith, you know. Noong 16th century sa Reformation, what you had was actually the breakdown of the medieval Christendom and the freeing of public spaces from the stranglehold ng institutional church, no? Which at that time is Catholicism. Now, at the same time, I think merong reaction din sa tinatawag na secularism, which says that yung totalistic claims of religion or Christianity as a faith, no, should be excluded from public space. Yun yung ideology ng secularism, which I think both Catholics and Protestants don't like, no? Yung secularization, okay yon, kasi it's a modernizing element, no? Uh, yung kasi you do not absolutize yung church as an institution to be making statements on all kinds of things like arts or politics or ganyan. So it's important to make that distinction, yung secularization tsaka secularism. But at the same time, I think it's important also to recognize na you cannot quarantine yung faith claims of a faith tradition. One of the hallmarks of modernity is yung pluralizing ng public space. So that, for instance, you have a free market of all kinds of religious ideas. No? Now, I think that's okay na meron kang ganong free spaces for a democratic pluralism, no? Ang problema is when, for instance, you start thinking of hegemony, whether it's Islamic, or Catholic, or Protestant, or whatever, no? Kaya merong separation of church and state. Pero I think whether you like it or not, yung merong ambiguity yung sinasabi ni Jesus na we are not of the world, but we are in the world. In other words, whether you like it or not, we are actively engaged in our social space. And merong tinatawag na prophetic tradition, where yung thus says the Lord, in other words, no? In other words, from your faith tradition and your moral values, you stand up for it in public space. Yun ang prophetic. But you need to make a distinction between that and politicking. Merong diferensya yung being prophetic and politicking. Politicking is when you use your institutional influence, but to put people into office. Now, the church is not supposed to be in that business. Ang church is supposed to be in that business of upholding moral values, no? In secular space. Yun ang prophecy. Yun ang prophetic. Hindi politicking. I think we need to make that distinction.
Teka, Before you ask me your question, which I know already you will ask me, I would like to say something about this topic because I have been trying all my life to defend my right to be in politics. And they always tell me, you are a religious, what are you, why are you there? No, that's why I have to define what is politics and what is church. Ang ino-object ni Randy is the church as an institution. But the church is not the institution. The church is we. The church is people. In that sense, may pakialam ako. And what is politics? Polis is city. I am in the polis. I am a citizen of the city, and therefore, as a citizen, I have the right to be participating in the decision making in this polis. Okay? And after I have defined that what is church and what is politics, the church must take part in politics. Church as people and politics as participation in the decision making that is happening in the polis. I'm very ano about that because I have been trying all my life to justify why I am there being an activist when I am a nun. And I remember once, this is just a thing. I was there on top of a 10-wheeler truck. Truck kasama ko si Lian Alejandro. And talking about, don't pay the oil price hike because it will make all the commodities high. Ganyan. Pagbaba ko, ito na yung policeman. Hindi ba madre ka? Sabi ko, oo, madre ako. Bakit? Hindi mo ba kita? Bakit? Why are you talking about oil price hike at saka mga wages at saka yung corruption etc. Hindi ba you should talk about mortal sin and venial sin, purgatory and hell? Hindi ba ang role ninyo, sister, is to save souls? Ang sabi ko sa kanya, bakit? May nakikita ka bang mga kaluluwang naglalakad dito? Sabi ko, I am concerned about the human being, body and soul in the context of his or her society. That is my concern. And I have the right to participate in deciding what happens to this human being, what kind of circumstances, economic, political, social, that is influencing worse or good this person. So I have the right.
Sister, is it for you? Is it acceptable for priests and religious to run for public office?
Well, you look at Among Ed. She had to be, what do you call it, size, no?
There is nothing in our law, in the Constitution, that prevents a member of the clergy from running for public
But
office.
there is a part in our
canonical-
statutes that we should not. I mean,
The
as a
church
religious
itself
congregation.
prohibits